I'm John Mason Smith. I'm on staff here at the church. Welcome to our church. Thank you so much for coming. We have this thing over here on this poster. It says it's okay to not be okay. And what we mean by that is you're welcome just as you are to our church. You can come anytime you want. This is now your church. You go to a bar church. What do you think about that? Awesome. Hey, that's some of the best bar. Hey, right here's a little program. You're going to want one of these. All right, if you didn't get one when you came in, I got helpful people that love to run around the room and hand you one. Just, this guy's sticking up his hand. He's looking for somebody, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, if you want to stick your hand up, you need a program, we'll get you one. There'll be a lot of things mentioned about it that you will be interested in. Hey, we're doing this little, or the Flora-Bama is doing some relief efforts for those hurt by the hurricanes in Texas, Hurricane Harvey. If they're collecting right over here as you go back out, if you want to bring in some stuff, there's a list on the Flora-Bama website which you can bring. They're taking donations tonight at midnight. They're going to run out with another load. They'll be going till 9 tonight. So if you want to scoop up some of those items and bring them down, you can ask them. You can ask them as you go out. If you go out that way, we sent Johnny McDaniel and his friend went with his boat, did their own little rescue there. They were needed. They met with the police department. It's very cool. We some of the first load, and then their boat really helped rescue people. So it's kind of cool that we're all plugging in there. And I'll leave off my saying I'd rather send relief than receive it. But we know that if it did happen here, they'd be doing the same for us. So very cool. Hey, I wanted to tell you about something we have coming up. It's called First Step. First Step is the next level, other than just coming here every week like many of you do. If you want to get more, take the next step into what happens in this church, you can go through our First Step gathering. It'll be happening September 17th. We haven't had one all summer. We took the summer off. September 17th is your next opportunity. 11 o'clock on the third floor. Instead of coming to service, you'll go up there, or you can come to the 9 and head up afterward. It's an opportunity to become an owner here at the Flora-Bama Church. We say owner instead of member. We really think that when you become a part of this kind of church, you better be looking for other people to bring, and we give you that ownership back out. So it's a big deal to us. We'd love for you to go through it, and a lot of you have, and I want to encourage you to think about it. All you have to do is fill out information card at the information tables, or you can send Amanda an email. It's on the back of your program, Amanda Kaufman, and say, hey, sign me up for this class. And she'll reach back out to you, give her a phone number, and she'll call you. And that way that you can learn more about that. You can also, like I said, stop by that information tables on both sides of the room. We have these things called the Next Step card. And that's a place where you can sign up for things. You can also get more involved. If you want to be baptized, and we'll have a baptism today at the end of this service out on the beach. Yay! We had one after 9. It was awesome. It's a beautiful day. The water's perfect. But if you want to be baptized, you can just show up. Or you can fill out one of these cards and mark baptism. Also join a small group and get more involved or serve in all the opportunities we're going to get you to do that. Hey, wanted to also let you know at the information tables where you get those cards. You can leave them there, or you can put them in the giving stations. We have 3 of them. One over there where the little signs are. You can see them. 1, 2, 1 outside. It's also where you can give your offering. One of the things that I want to share with you is a prison ministry we're doing. It's called Sunshine Ministries. Ken and Cindy Lambert do it. We help support them monthly. Ken is actually the very first musician to ever play the Flora-Bama. And he was on the wrong road, and he turned his life around. And he does this fantastic ministry. They go into prisons all in this area, but all throughout the South, all the way to Texas. And they do many other things along those lines. And we just get behind him all the way on that. And we support him each month. And that's some of what the money you give goes. And thank you for doing that. Hey, I do have a little something. I got a feeling there's some people who hadn't been here before. Yeah, maybe 1 or 2. That's right. It's awkward. I don't want to tell people. They'll show up with brownies. I wish we showed up with brownies. I'd say I'm a first-time guest every week. Hey, but I'm not. We're going to give a present, though, right to one of you, and it's not brownies, it's a shirt. If you have never been to the Flora-Bama Church, it's okay if you were at the bikini contest yesterday. But if you have never been to the Flora-Bama Church, we're going to give you a shirt. Brandon's holding it up. Look at the back. It's awesome. Ooh, you like that? We're going to give it to one of our first-time visitors. It's a contest. Very simple. You just have to be further away than everyone else that says that they're a first-time guest. Shout out where you're from. If I think you're further, you're going to win the shirt right now. Where? All the way from Alabama. Doesn't matter. Kentucky, I already beat you. All right, way in the back. Arizona and Indiana. Arizona, I think, is further. Just saying. I don't know, south, east. Where? Iowa. Come back in winter and fight for that one. Anyone? I don't know. I'm kind of on Arizona going over here. LA? You mean Lower Alabama? Come on. Yeah, forget it. All right. Where's Arizona over there? She's in the back. That right? You're Arizona, right? All right. She's going to win the shirt. It's a hot one. Hey, I invite everyone to stand up. And if you have someone near you don't know, why don't you introduce yourself right now?
How sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. I once was blind, oh, but now I see.
Yeah, why don't you guys grab a seat? Good morning, everybody. Everybody feel it all right this morning? We're so glad you all are here. If this is your very first time, welcome. If it's been a long time since you've been here, welcome back. My name is Dan. I'm the pastor here at the Flora-Bama. And if you guys have been here for the last couple weeks, we finished up a series we called Squad Goals. How many of you guys are here for some of that? A little bit of it. Oh, awesome. All right. Well, thanks for hanging out with us again this weekend. I've had over the last probably month and a half, a couple pretty interesting conversations. You guys ever had a conversation that just kind of stuck with you, right? Just kind of stuck with you. There was something that was said. Well, I've had about 4 of those conversations over the last month and a half, maybe 2 months. And the last one happened right out here after a church service. It was just a typical, it was a Sunday morning. It was after a 9 o'clock service. We have a service that happens right before this at 9 o'clock. And someone walked right out there and they grabbed my hand and gave me a big hug. It was really great. And I was all sweaty and they didn't mind. That was nice. And they said, "Hey, I just want you to know that I pray for you." I thought, wow, that's awesome. I said, "Thank you." And then she said, "I pray for you because you're doing God's work." I thought, oh, that's a sweet thing to say. It's a sweet thing to hear. But that statement has been kind of just, I've been thinking about it, kind of just put it in I wrote a little note about it. I actually wrote down the comments. And I just been kind of marinating on that phrase. And then that phrase brought up the idea of a couple more conversations that I've had over the last month or so. I actually wrote the quotes down so I didn't forget what they were. And at first, all of these 4 conversations seemed unrelated. But when I was standing out here and I got that comment, something kind of clicked. There was like this underlying theme. The first one was this. This person said to me, hey, I've been working super hard my whole life. And this person explained their whole life, and I thought, yeah, man, this dude's been working hard his whole life. And he said, I finally got to the place in my life where it's my time, and I'm going to shift into neutral for a while and enjoy from all the hard work I've done. I just said, man, congratulations. That's awesome. That's awesome. The next conversation I had, which again, I didn't think at the time had anything to do with that conversation, we were talking and this person said to me, Dan, if you knew my whole life story, like if you had a few hours and a few drinks with me, you would realize very quickly, my whole goal in life right now is just to try to walk the straight and narrow path and not get in any trouble, right? So that was a great conversation. I thought, man, that's awesome that you've made some steps forward, that Christ has transformed your life. The third conversation ended up them saying, hey, I'm not really I love what they were talking about the church. I love the band and I love what you do and all that. They said, but I'm not really don't put a microphone in my hand. I'm not an upfront, type of a spotlight kind of person. I'm good just to come and enjoy the show. And I thought, that's great. Come, sit back, relax. That's what we want. But when I was outside and that person came to me and told me that I was doing God's work, for some reason, it kept bugging me, not in a bad way, it just kind of kept nagging at me. And then I went home and I thought about those other conversations. Because when you say, and this person probably didn't realize that they were saying it, but when you look at someone and say, hey, you're doing so great, you're doing God's work. Oftentimes what ends up happening is we look at someone else as the person doing God's work, and what I'm doing is just kind of whatever, but it's not as important as that person doing God's work. And then that first conversation I had with that very first person, this is several weeks ago, they said, hey, I've worked really hard my whole life, and it was almost like they were saying, hey, I've kind of worked myself. What else could I do? I'm retired, and I'm not I'm not as young as I used to be. I'm ready to shift into neutral for a while. But there was this sense that they weren't doing it out of selfishness. They were doing it because they kind of felt, hey, I don't know how much life I have left. God willing, I'll live to an old age, but whatever years I have left, come on, I'm not 20 anymore. What else could I really have to offer, right? And then that second conversation I had was pretty interesting because before we even got too far into the conversation, they disqualified themselves by saying, they weren't disqualified, but they were kind of using their story as a, hey, Dan, if you only knew what I've done. And for me to confess it to a preacher, I'd have to have a few drinks in me anyways. So if I did confess it to you, you'd realize I'm not qualified to offer anything. I'm not qualified. And then there's some of us, like this one person that said, hey, I can't speak, I can't sing, I can't act, I don't have tons and tons of resources to help and to give, and what really do I have to offer? It's a pretty interesting conversation. It's a pretty interesting conversation when you hear from the other end people almost kind of just throwing up their hands and saying, God's work is for someone else, right? That gift, what an awesome gift. They're so lucky to have that gift, and I'll cheer them on, but I don't really have that gift. Most of us, if we're really being honest, most of us would not. We've all met people that think very highly of themselves, you know what I mean? They're awesome, just ask them, you know what I mean? We've all been around people like that, but most people aren't like that. Most people, when they think about gifts, name somebody gifted, they're not the first person on their own list. Or talented, or have something to contribute. They'll name 10 other people before they ever name themselves. And I want to talk about that a little bit today. Now, I've met somebody really, really cool. I met about a year ago, my friend Jimmy. Now, Jimmy's one of those guys, one of the very coolest things about Jimmy is Jimmy has kind of realized, you could say maybe uncovered or discovered his gift. He's got a pretty cool gift that I'm extremely jealous of. He's a great musician, great songwriter, but his unique gift is he's able to hear a story and then retell that story through song. I want you to help me to welcome my friend Jimmy Yeary as he comes up to the stage. So as Jimmy's getting ready, one of the very cool things was that Jimmy discovered what his gift was. Now, I want you just for a moment, I want you to think about you. Just think about you for just a minute. I know the morning's probably been really busy and you've thought about a lot of other people other than you. I've got kids, my wife and I, we barely, our hair's barely getting combs to run out the door because we've got 5 other people that we're thinking about. And so just for the next few minutes, I want us to think about us for a second. I want you to think about your gifts and your talents and your voice and your contribution. I always love getting around people that have discovered theirs. Now, Jimmy's got this great way of telling stories through song, and I don't want to give this whole first song that Jimmy's going to do with us away. But you heard a story, another person's story on NPR, and then you. So I want you to tell that story, and then I want you to, if you'd be willing to share how you tell that story through song.
I would love to, Dan. Thank you. Y'all have an amazing preacher here, don't you? Yeah. What a great communicator. He really is. Thank you for having me. I've played in a lot of bars in my life. I've never done a church service in one, so this is pretty awesome. I love what you were talking about, Dan, about being broken, and not feeling qualified. If anybody in this room isn't qualified, I can guarantee you it's me. I've certainly done enough in my life to unqualify myself. And I'll tell you, it's I've learned the older I get, the more I live, the closer I get to God, the more I realize that my assets, what I have to give, is my brokenness. So if you're broke, I'd love to know about it. I'd love to hear about it, because that helps me not feel alone, right? Because we're all human. We all make mistakes. We're all scared to death at times. And we all worry about our hair getting frizzy in the heat. So I'm not going to point out anybody. Dan was telling you about a song that I was so honored to be a part of. We heard a story on NPR radio. And they were interviewing a man by the name of Paul Monty. And Paul Monty had a son in Afghanistan in the war. Jared Monty. And Jared Monty, his son, went out to save members of his battalion. And he went out once. He went out twice. And on his 3rd attempt, he was killed. And so he received the Medal of Honor, and Paul received that on his behalf. And so Paul went all over the country to make sure that on Memorial Day, graves had flags on them. And so they interviewed him and asked him how he coped with the loss of such a wonderful hero, such a wonderful son. And he said, I drive his truck. Haven't changed anything in it. It's exactly the way it was the day he left. So we wanted to write this song, had no idea what it would do, where it would go, who it would touch. But this is called I Drive Your Truck. $0.89 in the ashtray, half-empty bottle of Gatorade rolling in the floorboard. That dirty Braves cap on the dash, dog tags hanging from the rear view, old skull can and cowboy boots, and a Go Army shirt folded in the back. This thing burns gas like crazy, but that's alright. People got their ways of coping, and I got mine. I drive your truck, I roll every window down, and I burn all the pain's a cloud of dust. Yeah, sometimes I drive your truck. I leave that radio playing, same old country station where you left it. Yeah, man, I crank it up, and you'd probably punch my arm right now if you saw this tear rolling down on my face. Yeah, man, I'm trying to be tough. Mama asked me this morning if I'd been by your grave, but that flag and stone ain't where I feel you anyway. I drive your truck, I roll every window down, and I burn up every back road in this town. I find a field, tear it up till all the pain's a cloud of dust. Yeah, sometimes I drive your truck. I've yelled, prayed, said goodbye, shook my fist and asked God why. But these days, when I'm missing you this much, I drive your truck. I roll every window down, and I burn up every back road in this town. I find the field, tear it up till all the pain's a cloud of dust. Yeah, sometimes, brother, sometimes I drive your truck. I drive your truck. And I hope you don't mind, I drive your truck. I want to thank you, Jared Monty, for what you did for this country. Thank y'all.
So I want you to stay there, Jimmy. Yeah, if that's all right. Isn't it awesome when someone discovers their gift and shares it? Right? Isn't that beautiful? Don't great musicians annoy you? Unbelievable. I wanted to be a great musician and singer my whole life, and I suck. But it's a beautiful thing. It's beautiful when somebody, and whether that be on a microphone or someone that in your neighborhood, that there's this lady in our neighborhood, and I don't know how it all worked out or why it all happens, but she always is using her gifts to make our neighborhood, the front entryway, the sidewalk leading to the first turn, to look beautiful. She has a gift. And she's always up there working heat. I've seen her out there in the rain. She's got this unbelievable gift. And I'm inspired when I see other people uncover and discover their gifts. I think sometimes we don't think we're gifted, and then we have a list of reasons why that is. Oftentimes, in the conversations that I've had, so that's, several, but not to speak for everyone, but oftentimes, whether or not we feel like we have something to contribute, whether we feel like we're gifted or talented, has a lot to do with how we view ourselves and how we compare ourselves with someone else that we look at and give them the label gifted, talented, right? And oftentimes, where I have struggled the most in trying to figure out my giftedness or my talents in life, or whatever contribution I'm supposed to make in this world, it's been traced back to how I see or how I think God thinks about me. Because I don't know about you, but I have watched people and thought, man, has God gifted them? Right? And we tend to view ourselves through this very interesting lens, through God has given certain people these very amazing gifts, and I'm just not one of those guys. I'm just not one of those ladies that have that gift. I wish I did, and I'm going to cheer for the one that does, but I just don't have those gifts. And oftentimes, one of the reasons why we don't go in search to discover our gift, or we're not willing to use our gift, is because of how little value we think it has. But it's because, one of the main reasons is because we have no clue how valuable that gift is that God has planted in us. And oftentimes it's because of our view of God. There's this really interesting, I don't know if you guys are big Bible readers or you read the Bible often, it's a part of your daily life, but there's this moment where Jesus is hanging out with his disciples, and they asked him, his 12 closest friends asked him, Jesus, how should we pray? You know, you're praying and all these amazing things are happening. How should we pray? And that's come to be known as the Lord's Prayer, right? The first two words of the Lord's Prayer speak directly to who God really is. Now, the writers of all 66 books of the Bible explain God all kinds of ways, but it seems like at the apex of who God is, the first couple words of the Lord's Prayer says, Our Father. I think sometimes we have a misperception of who God is and how he thinks, what he's thinking about when he thinks about you. Now, I don't know what your definition or how you would define a father is. Some of you guys have had great fathers. Some of you have absent fathers. Some of you it was a tough father-child relationship. And so I like to say it like this, that God is a father, but he's not like your father. And as amazing of a father as you may be, or amazing of a father that you had, we're imperfect. And so though God is a father, he is so much more compared to any earthly father. And he has given you and I these amazing gifts and talents. And sometimes I just feel like we don't see them because we see ourselves tainted from the way God sees us. So I got to know Jimmy just a little bit. Found out he's got some kids. Tell us a little bit about your kids.
Yes, I have a 6-year-old boy, a 2-year-old boy, and a 5-month-old girl.
Yeah, 5 months old.
Yeah, and I'm still trying to catch up on sleep because 2 nights ago, I think I told you about this, I was in bed and my son came in and he said, Dad, you're going to have to come to my bed. I got to show you something. So in the middle of the night, I go to his room and he said, there's a spider in my bed. And I go, no, there's not, son. I'm certain of it. Dad, I killed it. There's a spider in my bed. So I'm looking through the covers and I'm searching. There's no spider, son. There's no spider. I promise you, go to bed. I go back to my bed. He comes back and he says, Dad, can I please sleep with you? There are spiders in my bed. I said, get in bed, son. I've got to get some sleep. And he wakes me up again and says, Dad, I think there's spiders in this bed. And so that was about 3 hours of no sleep. But yes, I got a family, and I changed diapers, and I probably got a little bit of something on my arms I still need to wash off. But it's a big family, crazy family, and I love it. I'm blessed. Yes.
Yeah, it's awesome. I'm the same way. Lindsay and I, we've got kids, and if you are a father, if you're a parent in general, really, it's very interesting on your perspective on your kids and then their perspective on themselves. Isn't it very interesting? It's hilarious. It's like it's full-time action, right? There's full-time, not getting sleep, but it's pure entertainment at times. Just pure entertainment. One of the most interesting things is about my relationship with my kids is the stuff that they don't realize that I know. They don't know it yet. They're going to learn it yet. They're going to learn it. And when they do, it's the best. I remember throwing baseballs to my oldest son, Abraham, out in the backyard, and him missing and him getting frustrated. I wasn't frustrated at all. I just loved watching him swing because I knew, give it enough swings, what's going to happen? he's just going to get lucky eventually. You know what I'm saying? The odds are, athletic or not, that kid's going to hit a ball. Well, he didn't realize it. So he's banging his bat on the ground. He didn't realize, son, just keep swinging the bats, right? And I remember the pitch, boom, and he smacked it. I was way more excited than he ever was. That is the heart. Listen, that's the heart of our Father. That, yeah, we've messed up and swung that bat at stuff 1,000 times and missed. But there's some things that he knows that we don't know quite yet. And Jimmy, I would love if you would share that song.
Absolutely.
With us.
Yeah. You know, you said a great thing, Dan. You said that God is not like our earthly father, right? You may have had a wonderful father, and that's awesome. I didn't. I had a man that I loved so much, but he wasn't a nice man to me most of the time. He was actually quite abusive, I think you could say at times, physically and mentally. But I never felt love from my dad, and I always felt like that he was looking for a reason to put his thumb on me and say, I got you. There you go. That's what you're doing wrong. So I never really felt like I could live up. And I spent years running from God, feeling like that is God. That's the only example of a father I ever knew, was that man. And it turns out he's not that man at all. Turns out he loves us more than we realize, more than we could ever realize. Just like I love my own kids more than they'll ever know. I think they'll get it one day when they have kids, but doesn't it make you want to tear up when you think about your kids and how much you love them? There's not a greater love. It's amazing. God loves us more than that. He certainly doesn't mind our mistakes and our brokenness. I think if you don't know your gift today, that's your gift. It's your brokenness. It's your mistakes. It's what you've done wrong. I want to hear about it. I'll tell you what I've done wrong. We can help each other, not feel alone. This is called He Don't Know That Yet. He'll watch me drive a nail with a hammer in one hand, like I'm some kind of put two boards together Superman. I'm just your average everyday Home Depot weekend guy at best, but he don't know that yet. Well, sometimes I get home worn slap out, and I barely kiss his mama, and that football's in his hand, saying, come on, Dad, you promised, and we'll win them backyard Super Bowls with one tired quarterback. But he don't know that yet. He don't know that life ain't nothing like it is on TV. When I say that'll hurt you, I can tell he don't believe me. And half the time, the man he thinks I am is scared to death. But he don't know that yet. Well, he'll find out my love of fishing was watching his bobber sink. Yeah, and Santa brought the toys, but the money came from me. And that doggone back, it didn't put itself together while he slept. But he don't know that yet. He don't know that life ain't nothing like it is on TV. When I say that'll hurt you, I can tell he don't believe me. And half the time, the man he thinks I am, he's scared to death. But he don't know that yet. Nah, he don't know that life ain't nothing like it is on TV. And I say that'll hurt you, his little brave heart don't believe me. Dinosaur pajamas, kneeling beside me, talking to Jesus. Man, that's the best. But he don't know
Thank you. Isn't that powerful? It's so comforting to start viewing our lives through the eyes that God sees us with. Because sometimes we filter out the idea that we're unique and special. And I remember hearing this one time, and it kind of took me a while to wrap my brain around, but I heard a guy say one time, if you were the only person on the planet, Christ would have still died for you. And that took me, it was kind of I was like, oh, okay, it's a nice thing to stay at church, but how true it is, because God's love is so much bigger. And when God thinks about you, and when God looks at your life today, and He looks at the life that you think that past full of all these mistakes, see, God doesn't see all of that we see. And when we always say, they always say we're our own worst critic and we can find our own flaws the quickest. See, God's not looking at what you would consider flaws, because you have been wonderfully and beautifully and perfectly made by your Creator. Are you a perfect human being? No. But when God looks at you, He is pleased with you. There's this really cool moment in Jesus' life that I'm so thankful somebody wrote down, because it was only about 13 people involved in this conversation. Jesus was with his 12 closest friends, his disciples, and it was a private moment. They were away from the crowds, they were away from people, and it was just Jesus and the 12. One of the 12's name was Matthew, this guy named Matthew. And Matthew, later in life, wrote down that intimate conversation that Jesus had with Matthew and his 11 other friends, the 12, what the Bible calls 12 disciples. Now, if you've got your program, I want you to open it up, because inside is part of that conversation, part of that intimate conversation that nobody alive at the time was privy to, but Matthew wrote it down later. And Jesus is teaching these guys about what God's kingdom, what God's way of life is all about. Now, this is called, what the Bible calls, what Jesus taught and oftentimes was called a parable. Parable. A parable is nothing more than a lesson or a teaching using earthly things that you can see and touch and feel and smell and taste, but they have much more significance than the items that are talked about. They have like a heavenly or a spiritual lesson behind them. And so here's what he says: the kingdom of heaven can be illustrated by the story of a man going on a long trip. He called together his employees and entrusted his money to them while he was gone. He gave 5 bags of silver to one, 2 bags of silver to another, 1 bag of silver to the last, dividing in a proportion to their abilities. He then left on his trip. Pretty straightforward story so far. The one who received the 5 bags of silver began to invest the money, and he earned 5 more. The one with 2 bags of silver also went out to work, and he earned 2 more. But the one who received the 1 bag of silver dug a hole in the ground and hid the master's money. Pretty interesting story. Now, the parable, you can go back yourself and read Matthew chapter 25, and the parable is much longer than that. But what's interesting to me is I can remember the first time I read this story. Now, if you've grown up reading a different version of the Bible instead of bags of silver, you may have heard maybe a King James version or an older version say something like he buried his talents, which was an amount of money. And so this boss divvies out some bags of silver, and what in the world does this have to do with God, Jesus, and our lives? It's very quick to look at the one guy and be like, look at this story. It's all about, look at these 2 great people. 5 goes, he invests and he gets 10, and this guy's got 2 and he invests and he gets 2 more, and then this one guy, what an idiot, buries it. He should have known better. In fact, the story goes on and says he did know better. He knew that he should do something with it. Or at least he could have just followed the leader, This guy has 5, he's getting 10. I'm just going to do what he does. This person has 2, he's getting 2 more. I'm going to at least do what he does. But instead, he buries it. It's very easy for me to pass quick judgment and say, this stupid guy just buries it, But if I'm being really honest, more than one time in my life, I have looked at my one bag of silver, compared it to somebody else's 5, and said, insignificant. What can anybody do? What could God even do? What could I even do with what I have? But look at them. They are so talented and so gifted, and they've got so much to offer. Their contribution would be so much more than my little puny contribution. I'm just going to bury it, kind of forget about it. No harm, no foul. No one's getting hurt over the whole thing. It's so easy because when we look at our bag, the bag that we've been given, the gifts and the talents, the voice, the contribution to the world that God has intended for us to make, we often think it's unnecessary. We disqualify ourselves because of something that we've done, like Jimmy mentioned, our brokenness. And so we bury it. Not because we're jerks and not because we're lazy, but because we don't see it as valuable. This guy isn't bearing it because he's lazy. He's bearing it because, what do I got? This guy got 5, I've got 1. I've got nothing. Jesus is telling these disciples this story on purpose. And Matthew, inspired by God's Spirit, wrote it down because he knew that a couple thousand years later, there'd be a whole group of people gathered together right now, today, that would be reading it. And that there'd be a group of people under that tent and up in that main bar, and they'd be sitting there sweating, fanning themselves off. But in a situation in their lives where they too may have taken their gifts and their talents and their unique contribution to the world and thought it worthless. So they buried it. But the reason Jesus told the story is so that that would not be our story. That we would leave here not being the one who digs the hole and buries the bag of silver. That we would leave here different. That for some of us today, maybe it starts a new conversation of, Dan, I'm going to be honest with you, I don't even know what my gifts or talents or abilities would even be. You don't need to uncover your gifts. You may need to discover the things that God has uniquely designed you to do. That conversation can be as simple as, God, what is it? I promise whatever it is, I won't bury it, but help me to see what it is my voice is, what it is my contribution is. And for some of us, we've buried it. We've buried it because it's been insignificant to us. We've buried it because we've held it up against somebody else's and it's not been good enough. Or we've tried using it and we have failed. Or we've tried saying something and nobody listened. Or we've tried doing this and it seems as if it's not enough. So we buried it. Jimmy's got this beautiful song I'm going to ask him to sing in just a second. How great has it been having Jimmy Yeary with us here today? Come on, yes. Now, before he says what he's going to say and sings this last song, because he would never do this about himself, let me just tell you, Jimmy is the real deal. This is what he does. This is his thing. He is an unbelievable singer, songwriter. So Kenny Chesney's last #1 hit, Jimmy wrote. Rascal Flatts' last #1 hit, Jimmy wrote. Jimmy's got hundreds of songs in circulation on the radio. You guys probably recognize it. I Drive Your Truck song from the radio. And Jimmy has found his voice and his gift. But I want to be very, very clear. That in Jimmy's hand, God has placed a bag of silver. And it's not better, it's not more valuable than the bag of silver Jesus has placed in your hands. So my prayer is, as Jimmy shares this last song and talks about it, that God would speak to our hearts, because, listen, God isn't done with you yet. Thank you, Dan.
as I'm listening to you talk, I just, I can't say it enough. I mean, forget the hits, the money, you can chase it, alcohol, drugs, girls, whatever you want. I've done it. It don't work. It just doesn't work. And that's why I love to go around and do this, to talk to people and let them know I'm broken. I'm broken today. I still struggle today. I still get scared to death today over the silly stuff that I don't let God have. And I need to hear that as well. I spent years in church going, man, show me somebody real, somebody that's been through it, somebody that don't have it all together, somebody that isn't perfect. I thought everybody was perfect, and I wasn't. And somehow something was wrong with me. We're all messed up. That's why he came. That's why he did what he did. It's okay. And I'll remind you, if you don't know what that gift is, I'm telling you what, come to me and tell me your brokenness. I want to hear it. I want to relate to it. It helps me so much. And I would encourage you to tell other people, tell your family, tell people that respect you, tell your kids, tell your wife, tell your husband. It's God's way, I believe, of making us stronger, making us closer. This song talks about, I wrote it with Andy Andrews, who's sitting over here, and I've had a wonderful few days with him and his family, Polly and Austin and Adam. But we wrote a song that kind of talks about, I just one day told him, said, I want to write a song about my brokenness. I've done some silly stuff and had people say some awful things about me, and it's done. That's the end of his story. But this is called End of the Story. There's more to the story. That's what it's called. And I'm telling you, no matter what you're going through, how broke you are, what you're going through right now, there is more to your story. And it can become part of your story. And that will be what helps somebody and turns somebody else around, because they can relate to what you've been through. I've been put down. I've been judged. I've been written off, pushed aside, yeah, told what I was never gonna be. But there was more to the story. Well, I believed them for good reason, 'cause I had my chances. I thought I was done. Trust me, there was more to the story. 'Cause there were chapters in my life still unwritten. The author knew the ending even though it was hidden from me. The longer that I lived, the more I realized there's something better waiting, yeah, as long as I got air to breathe. There's more to the story. If where I was is where you are now, well, you might think your best days are done, but that's a lie. Trust me. There's more to your story. 'Cause there are chapters in your life still unwritten. The author knows the ending even though it's hidden from you and me. The rain will stop, the clouds are breaking when they do. There's something better waiting, yeah, as long as you got air to breathe. There's more to the story. The longer that I live, the more I realize there's something better waiting, yeah, as long as I got air to breathe. I've been put down, I've been judged, yeah, I've been written off, pushed aside, told what I was never going be. There was more to my story. Amen. Thank you all so much.
Awesome. Thank you, Jimmy. Well, I don't know that there's anything more to say. That last line, that if you've got air in your lungs, if you've got air to breathe, your story isn't over. So don't shift into neutral. Don't let your past self-disqualify you from God doing something amazing in you and through you. Don't compare whatever it is you think your gift is, compare it to somebody else's gift. Let God continue to write an amazing story in you and through you. Can I pray with you today? Let's bow our heads. Father, we are so grateful. So grateful for Jimmy and his gift. Speak a blessing over him and his family. So grateful that he discovered his gift. Father, my prayer is the same for all of us. God, I pray that nothing, not our past, not our comparisons, not our mistakes, not our brokenness, not our age, not what we think our abilities are, that nothing would get in the way of the story that you have written for us. God, I pray that our tomorrow will be greater than our today. God, use us. Use our gifts. Use our talents. Use our voice, that we may contribute to the world in a way that you've uniquely created us to contribute. I pray these things for myself. I pray that my family gets a hold of this. I pray for all of us. We pray these things in Jesus' name. The Flora-Bama family said, amen. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with us. Listen, I know you may have some lunch plans, but before you go, would you do us two favors? One, we're going to get these chairs, and we're going to stick them right over here. But when you're done with the chairs, join us down at the water, down at the Gulf, for our baptism. And listen, I don't know what you're going to face this week, but I do know this. Romans 8 tells us that if God is for us, who can be against us? We love you guys. We'll see you next week.
Oh, I'll fly away.